Friends, I served for 8 years on the board of the Association of Fundraising Professionals Central South Carolina chapter in Columbia. I was held every seat on the executive committee, treasurer, secretary, vice president, and then I was president. And I was serving as president of our AFP chapter, and we were helping our state nonprofit association. At that point, it was called SCANPO, the South Carolina Association of Nonprofit Organizations. They're now called Together SC. We were helping SCANPO get ready for their state convention. And I got a call, and someone said, "Have you heard about this NANOE stuff?" And I said, "No, I don't know what it is." They said, "Well, it's Jimmy LaRose." They said, Jimmy scheduled the NANOE conference in Columbia. And I said, okay. And it's at the same time as the SCANPO conference. And so I said, okay. And they said, "Louis, you got to do something about this. He can't do this." And I said, "Well, why do I have to do something about it?" They said, "Because you're the president. You got to call him and stop him. Somebody's got to stop him. He must be stopped." So I called Jimmy. Now, I had met Jimmy a couple of times, right? But we hadn't really spent a lot of time together. And I called him, right? And I remember where I was on the street in Columbia, and he was out of town leading a conference, and we spent a half an hour on the phone together. And I just need to let you know, I gave him hell. I said, "Jimmy, you can't do this." It was not a pleasant conversation for 30 minutes because I took umbrage with this effort. And I want to let you know that most people, if they had had this conversation with me, would never talk to me again. They would go, because, we're in the South, they would go and talk about me behind my back. But never again would I hear from them because I was not nice on this conversation with Jimmy. But at the end of this conversation, instead of just hanging up the phone, instead of just being mad, instead of going off and talking about me behind my back, Jimmy said, "Why don't you join my wife and I for dinner in my home?" And I want to let you know, as a person of faith, that was a biblical moment for me, because rather than just casting me off, he said, "Come into my home, visit with me, break bread with me." And even though I had been raised and cut my teeth on AFP, every time I got to an issue with Jimmy about the nonprofit sector and the way things ought to be done, I agreed with him. The problem is, all these things that people had told me about Jimmy LaRose weren't true. Everything he said was right. And it was from that day forward that I became a believer, and that I began to take on this project that we call NANOE. I want to let you know that in Jimmy LaRose, you will find someone who truly cares about you, who truly is willing to invest in your life, who truly cares about all the children and families across this nation and this world that we're trying to help. He's a person of integrity, and he works harder than anyone else I have ever met. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, he lives and breathes NANOE. Now, I want to let you know, you probably have figured out that I'm a pretty passionate person, right? And Jimmy's a passionate person. And we've gotten in a lot of heated and passionate discussions. But he's never yelled at me about anything except one thing. And I want to tell you that story. So about 6 months ago, we're working with an organization, Habitat for Humanity, and we wanted to sit down with their CEO, Roy Kramer. And Jimmy says, "Well, let's have Roy over for lunch." So I get to go again to Jimmy's house and have lunch, and he invites Roy in, and we're talking over lunch over this pizza. Now, Jimmy's from New York, so when I'm eating pizza in Jimmy's house, I'm eating good pizza, right? It's New York pizza. It's the best pizza in the Columbia, South Carolina area. And then he had these things on a plate that were sitting up on the counter that I had never seen before. And I kind of had figured out that it was dessert because it looked like it had a pastry shell and it had some powder and had some cream in it. And I like dessert, and I was kind of waiting for this to come, but I didn't know what it was. And so Jimmy starts coming over with these things. I said, "What are those?" He said, "They're cannolis." Now, friends, I was raised in Farmville, Virginia. We only had 7,000 people in the town that I was raised, and 6,999 of them were born right there in Farmville, Virginia. We only had one guy from New York, and he made pizza. He was the Tony Perini. He made the best pizza, but he didn't have cannolis. So Jimmy sits this cannoli in front of me, and because I'm from Farmville, my mama raised me right, I know that I'm supposed to have manners, and I use a knife and a fork. And so I go to use my fork to steady this cannoli and my knife to cut into it. And as I'm doing this, as the knife is meeting the cannoli, I see out of my peripheral vision Jimmy rising up out of his chair. And I look up, and he's got this angry look on his face, and he yells, "Don't cut the cannoli!" And then I had already cracked the shell this hard, and so he took that one away and graciously brought me another one. And he taught me the proper way to eat a cannoli. So, brothers and sisters, I want to bring up Jimmy LaRose, and I just want to let you know that as you work with him, as you talk with him, you can do anything, you can do no wrong. Just remember, don't cut the cannoli.